This is a Willow audiobook. Ozma of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Read by Stephen Alexander. Chapter 5. Dorothy opens the dinner pail. "Now, Tik-Tok," said Dorothy, "the first thing to be done is to find a way for us to escape from these rocks. The whalers are down below, you know, and threaten to kill us."
"There is no reason to be afraid of the whalers," said
Tik-Tok, the words coming more slowly than before. "Why not?" she asked.
"Because they are..."
He gave a sort of gurgle and stopped short, waving his hands frantically, until suddenly he became motionless, with one arm in the air and the other held stiffly before him, with all the copper fingers of the hand spread out like a fan. "Dear me," said Dorothy in a frightened tone. "What can the matter be?" "He's run down, I suppose," said the hen calmly. "You couldn't have wound him up very tight." "I didn't know how much to wind him," replied the girl, "but I'll try to do better next time." She ran around the copper man to take the key from the peg at the back of his neck, but it was not there. "It's gone!" cried Dorothy in dismay. "What's gone?" asked Billina. "The key." "It probably fell off when he made that low bow to you," returned the hen. "Look around and see if you cannot find it again." Dorothy looked, and the hen helped her, and by the girl discovered the clock key, which had fallen into a crack of the rock. At once she wound up Tik-Tok's voice, taking care to give the key as many turns as it would go around. She found this quite a task, as you may imagine if you have ever tried to wind a clock, but the machine man's first words were to assure Dorothy that he would now run for at least 24 hours.
"You did not wind me much at first,"
he calmly said.
"and I told you that long story about King Evoldo, so it is no wonder that I ran down."
She next rewound the action clockwork, and then Billina advised her to carry the key to Tik-Tok in her pocket so it would not get lost again. "And now," said Dorothy when all this was accomplished, "tell me what you were going to say about the whalers."
"Why, they are nothing to be frightened at," said the machine. "They try to make folks believe that they are very terrible, but as a matter of fact, the whalers are harmless enough to anyone who dares to fight them. They might try to hurt a little girl like you, perhaps, because they are very mischievous. But if I had a club, they would run away as soon as they saw me."
"Haven't you a club?" asked Dorothy.
"No,"
said Tik-Tok. "And you won't find such a thing among these rocks either," declared the yellow hen. "Then what shall we do?" asked the girl.
"Wind up my think works tightly, and I will try to think of some other plan,"
said Tik-Tok. So Dorothy rewound his thought machinery, and while he was thinking, she decided to eat her dinner. Billina was already pecking away at the cracks in the rocks to find something to eat, so Dorothy sat down and opened her tin dinner pail. In the cover she found a small tank that was full of very nice lemonade. It was covered by a cup, which might also, when removed, be used to drink the lemonade from. Within the pail were 3 slices of turkey, 2 slices of cold tongue, some lobster salad, 4 slices of bread and butter, a small custard pie, an orange and 9 large strawberries, some nuts and raisins. Singularly enough, the nuts in this dinner pail grew already cracked, so that Dorothy had no trouble in picking out their meats to eat. She spread the feast upon the rock beside her and began her dinner, first offering some of it to Tik-Tok, who declined because, as he said, he was merely a machine. Afterwards she offered to share with Billina, but the hen murmured something about dead things and said she preferred her bugs and ants. "Do the lunchbox trees and the dinner pail trees belong to the Wheelers?" the child asked Tik-Tok while engaged in eating her meal.
"Of course not," he answered. "They belong to the royal family of Ev. Only, of course, there is no royal family just now, because King Evoldo jumped into the sea, and his wife and 10 children have been transformed by the Gnome King. So there is no one to rule the land of Ev that I can think of. Perhaps it is for this reason that the Wheelers claim the trees for their own and pick the luncheons and dinners to eat themselves. But they belong to the king, and you will find the royal E stamped upon the bottom of every dinner pail."
Dorothy turned the pail over, and at once discovered the royal mark upon it, as Tik-Tok had said. "Are the Wheelers the only folks living in the land of Ev?" inquired the girl.
"No, they only inhabit a small portion of it, just back of the woods,"
replied the machine.
"But they have always been mischievous and impertinent, and my old master, King Evoldo, used to carry a whip with him when he walked out to keep the creatures in order. When I was first made, the Wheelers tried to run over me and butt me with their heads, but they soon found I was built of too solid a material for them to injure."
"You seem very durable," said Dorothy. "Who made you?"
"The firm of Smith and Tinker in the town of Evna, where the royal palace stands,"
answered Tik-Tok. "Did they make many of you?" asked the child.
"No, I am the only automatic mechanical man they ever completed," he replied. "They were very wonderful inventors, were my makers, and quite artistic in all they did."
"I'm sure of that," said Dorothy. "Do they live in the town of Evna now?"
"They are both gone," replied the machine. "Mr. Smith was an artist as well as an inventor, and he painted a picture of a river which was so natural that, as he was reaching across to paint some flowers on the opposite bank, he fell into the water and was drowned."
"Oh, I'm sorry for that," exclaimed the little girl.
"Mr. Tinker," continued
Tik-Tok,
"made a ladder so tall that he could rest the end of it against the moon while he stood on the highest rung and picked the little stars to set in the points of the king's crown. But when he got to the moon, Mr. Tinker found it such a lovely place that he decided to live there. So he pulled up the ladder after him, and we have never seen him since."
"He must have been a great loss to this country," said Dorothy, who was by this time eating her custard pie.
"He was,"
acknowledged Tik-Tok.
"Also, he is a great loss to me, for if I should get out of order, I do not know of anyone able to repair me, because I am so complicated. You have no idea how full of machinery I am."
"I can imagine it," said Dorothy readily.
"And now,"
continued the machine,
"I must stop talking and begin thinking again of a way to escape from this rock."
So he turned halfway around in order to think without being disturbed. "The best thinker I ever knew," said Dorothy to the yellow hen, "was a scarecrow." "Nonsense!" snapped Billina. "It is true," declared Dorothy. I met him in the Land of Oz, and he travelled with me to the city of the Great Wizard of Oz, so as to get some brains, for his head was only stuffed with straw. But it seemed to me that he thought just as well before he got his brains as he did afterward." "Do you expect me to believe all that rubbish about the Land of Oz?" inquired Billina, who seemed a little cross, perhaps because bugs were scarce. "What rubbish?" asked the child, who was now finishing her nuts and raisins. "Why, your impossible stories about animals that can talk, and a Tin Woodman who is alive, and a scarecrow who can think." "They are all there," said Dorothy, "for I have seen them." "I don't believe it," cried the hen, with a toss of her head. "That's 'cause you're so ignorant," replied the girl, who was a little offended at her friend Billina's speech.
"In the Land of Oz,"
remarked Tik-Tok, turning toward them,
"anything is possible, for it is a wonderful fairy country."
"There, Billina! What did I say?" cried Dorothy, and then she turned to the machine and asked in an eager tone, "Do you know the Land of Oz, Tik-Tok?"
"No, but I have heard about it,"
said the Copper Man.
"for it is only separated from this Land of Ev by a broad desert."
Dorothy clapped her hands together delightedly. "I'm glad of that," she exclaimed. "It makes me quite happy to be so near my old friends. The scarecrow I told you of, Billina, is the king of the Land of Oz."
"Pardon me, he is not the king now,"
said Tik-Tok. "He was when I left there," declared Dorothy.
"I know,"
said Tik-Tok.
"but there was a revolution in the Land of Oz, and the scarecrow was deposed by a soldier woman named General Ginger. And then Ginger was deposed by a little girl named Ozma, who was the rightful heir to the throne, and now rules the land under the title of Ozma of Oz."
"That is news to me," said Dorothy thoughtfully. "But I suppose lots of things have happened since I left the Land of Oz. I wonder what has become of the Scarecrow, and of the Tin Woodman and the Cowardly Lion. And I wonder who this girl Ozma is, for I never heard of her before." But Tik-Tok did not reply to this. He had turned around again to resume his thinking. Dorothy packed the rest of the food back into the pail so as not to be wasteful of good things, and the yellow hen forgot her dignity far enough to pick up all of the scattered crumbs, which she ate rather greedily, although she had so lately pretended to despise the things that Dorothy preferred as food. By this time, Tik-Tok approached them with his stiff bow.
"Be kind enough to follow me,"
he said,
"and I will lead you away from here to the town of Evna, where you will be more comfortable. And also, I will protect you from the Wheelers."
"All right," answered Dorothy promptly. "I'm ready." Chapter 6. The Heads of Langwidere. They walked slowly down the path between the rocks, Tik-Tok going first, Dorothy following him, and the yellow hen trotting along last of all. At the foot of the path, the Copper Man leaned down and tossed aside with ease the rocks that encumbered the way. Then he turned to Dorothy and said,
"Let me carry your dinner pail."
She placed it in his right hand at once, and the copper fingers closed firmly over the stout handle. Then the little procession marched out upon the level sands. As soon as the three Wheelers who were guarding the mound saw them, they began to shout their wild cries and rolled swiftly toward the little group, as if to capture them or bar their way. But when the foremost had approached near enough, Tik-Tok swung the tin dinner pail and struck the Wheeler a sharp blow over its head with the queer weapon. Perhaps it did not hurt very much, but it made a great noise, and the Wheeler uttered a howl and tumbled over upon its side. The next minute, it scrambled to its wheels and rolled away as fast as it could go, screeching with fear at the same time.
"I told you they were harmless,"
began Tik-Tok, but before he could say more, another Wheeler was upon them. Crack! Went the dinner pail against its head, knocking its straw hat a dozen feet away, and that was enough for this wheeler also. It rolled away after the first one, and the third did not wait to be pounded with the pail, but joined its fellows as quickly as its wheels would whirl. The yellow hen gave a cackle of delight, and flying to a perch upon Tik-Tok's shoulder, she said, "Bravely done, my copper friend, and wisely thought of, too. Now we are free from those ugly creatures." But just then, a large band of wheelers rolled from the forest, and relying upon their numbers to conquer, they advanced fiercely upon Tik-Tok. Dorothy grabbed Billina in her arms and held her tight, and the machine embraced the form of the little girl with his left arm, the better to protect her. Then the wheelers were upon them. Rappity bang, bang, went the dinner pail in every direction, and it made so much clatter bumping against the heads of the wheelers that they were much more frightened than hurt, and fled in a great panic. All, that is, except their leader. This wheeler had stumbled against another and fallen flat upon his back, and before he could get his wheels under him to rise again, Tik-Tok had fastened his copper fingers into the neck of the gorgeous jacket of his foe, and held him fast.
"Tell your people to go away,"
commanded the machine. The leader of the wheelers hesitated to give this order, so Tik-Tok shook him as a terrier dog does a rat, until the wheeler's teeth rattled together with a noise like hailstones on a window pane. Then, as soon as the creature could get its breath, it shouted to the others to roll away, which they immediately did.
"Now," said
Tik-Tok,
"you shall come with us and tell me what I want to know."
"You'll be sorry for treating me in this way," whined the wheeler. "I'm a terribly fierce person."
"As for that,"
answered Tik-Tok,
"I am only a machine and cannot feel sorrow or joy, no matter what happens. But you are wrong to think yourself terrible or fierce."
"Why so?" asked the wheeler.
"Because no one else thinks as you do. Your wheels make you helpless to injure anyone, for you have no fists and cannot scratch or even pull hair, nor have you any feet to kick with. All you can do is to yell and shout, and that does not hurt anyone at all."
The wheeler burst into a flood of tears, to Dorothy's great surprise. "Now I and my people are ruined forever," he sobbed, "for you have discovered our secret. Being so helpless, our only hope is to make people afraid of us by pretending that we are very fierce and terrible, and writing in the sand warnings to beware the wheelers. Until now we have frightened everyone, but since you have discovered our weakness, our enemies will fall upon us and make us very miserable and unhappy." "Oh no!" exclaimed Dorothy, who was sorry to see this beautifully dressed wheeler so miserable. "Tik-Tok will keep your secret, and so will Billina and I. Only you must promise not to try to frighten children any more if they come near to you." "I won't. Indeed, I won't," promised the wheeler, ceasing to cry and becoming more cheerful. "I'm not really bad, you know, but we have to pretend to be terrible in order to prevent others from attacking us."
"That is not exactly true,"
said Tik-Tok, starting to walk toward the path through the forest, and still holding fast to his prisoner, who rolled slowly along beside him.
"You and your people are full of mischief, and like to bother those who fear you, and you are often impudent and disagreeable too. But if you will try to cure those faults, I will not tell anyone how helpless you are."
"I'll try, of course," replied the wheeler eagerly. "And thank you, Mr. Tik-Tok, for your kindness."
"I am only a machine,"
said Tik-Tok.
"I cannot be kind any more than I can be sorry or glad. I can only do what I am wound up to do."
"Are you wound up to keep my secret?" asked the wheeler anxiously.
"Yes, if you behave yourself. But tell me, Who rules the land of Ev now?
asked the machine. There is no ruler, was the answer, because every member of the royal family is imprisoned by the Gnome King. But the Princess Langwidere, who is a niece of our late King Ivoldo, lives in a part of the royal palace and takes as much money out of the royal treasury as she can spend. The Princess Langwidere is not exactly a ruler, you see, because she doesn't rule, but she is the nearest approach to a ruler we have at present.
I do not remember her,
said Tik-Tok.
What does she look like?
That I cannot say, replied the Wheeler, although I have seen her 20 times. For the Princess Langwidere is a different person every time I see her, and the only way her subject can recognise her at all is by means of a beautiful ruby key which she always wears on a chain attached to her left wrist. When we see the key, we know we are beholding the princess. That is strange, said Dorothy in astonishment. Do you mean to say that so many different princesses are one and the same person? Not exactly, answered the Wheeler. There is, of course, but one princess, but she appears to us in many forms, which are all more or less beautiful. She must be a witch, exclaimed the girl. I do not think so, declared the Wheeler, but there is some mystery connected with her nevertheless. She is a very vain creature, and lives mostly in a room surrounded by mirrors, so that she can admire herself whichever way she looks. No one answered this speech, because they had just passed out of the forest, and their attention was fixed upon the scene before them. A beautiful vale in which were many fruit trees and green fields, with pretty farmhouses scattered here and there, and broad, smooth roads that led in every direction. In the centre of this lovely vale, about a mile from where our friends were standing, rose the tall spires of the royal palace, which glittered brightly against their background of blue sky. The palace was surrounded by charming grounds full of flowers and shrubbery. Several tinkling fountains could be seen, and there were pleasant walks bordered by rows of white marble statuary. All these details Dorothy was of course unable to notice or admire until they had advanced along the road to a position quite near to the palace, and she was still looking at the pretty sights when her little party entered the grounds and approached the big front door of the king's own apartments. To their disappointment, they found the door tightly closed. A sign was tacked to the panel, which read as follows: Owner absent. Please knock at the third door in the left wing.
Now,
said Tik-Tok to the captive Wheeler,
you must show us the way to the left wing.
Very well, agreed the prisoner. It's around here at the right. How can the left wing be at the right? Demanded Dorothy, who feared the Wheeler was fooling them. Because there used to be 3 wings, and 2 were torn down, so the one on the right is the only one left. It is a trick of the Princess Langwidere to prevent visitors from annoying her. Then the captive led them around to the wing, after which the machine man, having no further use for the Wheeler, permitted him to depart and rejoin his fellows. He immediately rolled away at a great pace, and was soon lost to sight. Tik-Tok now counted the doors in the wing, and knocked loudly upon the third one. It was opened by a little maid in a cap trimmed with gay ribbons, who bowed respectfully and asked, What do you wish, good people? Are you the Princess Langwidere? Asked Dorothy. No, miss. I'm her servant, replied the maid. May I see the princess, please? I will tell her you are here, miss, and ask her to grant you an audience, said the maid. Step in, please, and take a seat in the drawing-room. So Dorothy walked in, followed closely by the machine. But as the yellow hen tried to enter after them, the little maid cried, Shoo! And flapped her apron in Billina's face. Shoo yourself! Retorted the hen, drawing back in anger and ruffling up her feathers. Haven't you any better manners than that? Oh, do you talk? Inquired the maid, evidently surprised. Can't you hear me? Snapped Billina. Drop that apron and get out of the doorway so that I may enter with my friends. The princess won't like it, said the maid, hesitating. I don't care whether she likes it or not, replied Billina, and fluttering her wings with a loud noise, she flew straight at the maid's face. The little servant at once ducked her head, and the hen reached Dorothy's side in safety. "Very well," sighed the maid. "If you are all ruined because of this obstinate hen, don't blame me for it. It isn't safe to annoy the Princess Langwidere." "Tell her we are waiting, if you please," Dorothy requested with dignity. "Billina is my friend, and must go wherever I go." Without more words, the maid led them to a richly furnished drawing-room, lighted with subdued rainbow tints that came in through beautiful stained-glass windows. "Remain here," she said. "What names shall I give the princess?" "I am Dorothy Gale of Kansas," replied the child. "And this gentleman is a machine named Tik-Tok, and the yellow hen is my friend Billina." The little servant bowed and withdrew, going through several passages and mounting 2 marble stairways before she came to the apartments occupied by her mistress. Princess Langwidere's sitting room was panelled with great mirrors which reached from the ceiling to the floor. Also the ceiling was composed of mirrors, and the floor was of polished silver that reflected every object upon it. So when Langwidere sat in her easy chair and played soft melodies upon her mandolin, her form was mirrored hundreds of times in walls and ceiling and floor, and whichever way the lady turned her head, she could see and admire her own features. This she loved to do, and just as the maid entered, she was saying to herself, "This head with the auburn hair and hazel eyes is quite attractive. I must wear it more often than I have done of late, although it may not be the best of my collection." "You have company, Your Highness," announced the maid, bowing low. "Who is it?" asked Langwidere, yawning. "Dorothy Gale of Kansas, Mr. Tik-Tok, and Billina," answered the maid. "What a queer lot of names," murmured the princess, beginning to be a little interested. "What are they like? Is Dorothy Gale of Kansas pretty?" "She might be called so," the maid replied. "And is Mr. Tik-Tok attractive?" continued the princess. "That I cannot say, Your Highness, but he seems very bright." "Will your gracious highness see them?" "Oh, I may as well, Nanda. But I am tired admiring this head, and if my visitor has any claim to beauty, I must take care that she does not surpass me. So I will go to my cabinet and change to number 17, which I think is my best appearance. Don't you?" "Your number 17 is exceedingly beautiful," answered Nanda with another bow. Again the princess yawned. Then she said, "Help me to rise." So the maid assisted her to gain her feet, although Langwidere was the stronger of the two, and then the princess slowly walked across the silver floor to her cabinet, leaning heavily at every step upon Nanda's arm. Now I must explain to you that the Princess Langwidere had 30 heads, as many as there are days in the month. But of course, she could only wear one of them at a time, because she had but one neck. These heads were kept in what she called her cabinet, which was a beautiful dressing room that lay just between Langwidere's sleeping chamber and the mirrored sitting room. Each head was in a separate cupboard lined with velvet. The cupboards ran all around the sides of the dressing room, and had elaborately carved doors with gold numbers on the outside and jewelled framed mirrors on the inside of them. When the princess got out of her crystal bed in the morning, she went to her cabinet, opened one of the velvet-lined cupboards, and took the head it contained from its golden shelf. Then, by the aid of the mirror inside the open door, she put on the head, as neat and straight as could be, and afterward called her maids to robe her for the day. She always wore a simple white costume that suited all the heads. For being able to change her face whenever she liked, the princess had no interest in wearing a variety of gowns as have other ladies who are compelled to wear the same face constantly. Of course, the 30 heads were in great variety, no two formed alike, but all being of exceeding loveliness. There were heads with golden hair, brown hair, rich auburn hair and black hair, but none with grey hair. The heads had eyes of blue, of grey, of hazel, of brown and of black, but there were no red eyes among them, and all were bright and handsome. The noses were Grecian, Roman, retroussé and oriental, representing all types of beauty, and the mouths were of assorted sizes and shapes, displaying pearly teeth when the heads smiled. As for dimples, they appeared in cheeks and chins, wherever they might be most charming, and 1 or 2 heads had freckles upon the faces, to contrast the better with the brilliancy of their complexions. One key unlocked all the velvet cupboards containing these treasures, a curious key carved from a single blood-red ruby, and this was fastened to a strong but slender chain which the princess wore around her left wrist. When Nanda had supported Langwidere to a position in front of cupboard number 17, the princess unlocked the door with her ruby key, and after handing head number 9, which she had been wearing, to the maid, she took number 17 from its shelf and fitted it to her neck. It had black hair and dark eyes, and a lovely pearl and white complexion, and when Langwidere wore it, she knew she was remarkably beautiful in appearance. There was only one trouble with number 17. The temper that went with it, and which was hidden somewhere under the glossy black hair, was fiery, harsh and haughty in the extreme, and it often led the princess to do unpleasant things which she regretted when she came to wear her other heads. But she did not remember this today, and went to meet her guests in the drawing-room with a feeling of certainty that she would surprise them with her beauty. However, she was greatly disappointed to find that her visitors were merely a small girl in a gingham dress, a copper man that would only go when wound up, and a yellow hen that was sitting contentedly in Langwidere's best work-basket, where there was a china egg used for darning stockings. It may surprise you to learn that a princess ever does such a common thing as darn stockings, but if you will stop to think, you will realise that a princess is sure to wear holes in her stockings the same as other people do, only it isn't considered quite polite to mention the matter. "Oh," said Langwidere, slightly lifting the nose of number 17. "I thought someone of importance had called." "Then you were right," declared Dorothy. "I'm a good deal of importance myself, and when Billina lays an egg, she has the proudest cackle you ever heard. As for Tik-Tok, he's the—" "Stop! Stop!" commanded the princess, with an angry flash of her splendid eyes. "How dare you annoy me with your senseless chatter?" "Why, you horrid thing!" said Dorothy, who was not accustomed to being treated so rudely. The princess looked at her more closely. "Tell me," she resumed, "are you of royal blood?" "Better than that, ma'am," said Dorothy. "I came from Kansas." "Pooh!" cried the princess scornfully. "You are a foolish child, and I cannot allow you to annoy me. Run away, you little goose, and bother someone else." Dorothy was so indignant that for a moment she could find no words to reply. But she rose from her chair and was about to leave the room, when the princess, who had been scanning the girl's face, stopped her by saying more gently, "Come nearer to me." Dorothy obeyed without a thought of fear, and stood before the princess, while Langwidere examined her face with careful attention. "You are rather attractive," said the lady presently. "Not at all beautiful, you understand, but you have a certain style of prettiness that is different from that of any of my 30 heads. So, I believe I'll take your head and give you number 26 for it." "Well, I believe you won't," exclaimed Dorothy. "It will do you no good to refuse," continued the princess, "for I need your head for my collection. and in the land of Ev, my will is law. I never have cared much for number 26, and you will find that it is very little worn. Besides, it will do you just as well as the one you're wearing, for all practical purposes. I don't know anything about your number 26, and I don't want to, said Dorothy firmly. I'm not used to taking cast-off things, so I'll just keep my own head. You refuse? Cried the princess with a frown. Of course I do, was the reply. Then, said Langwidere, I shall lock you up in a tower until you decide to obey me. Nanda, turning to her maid, call my army. Nanda rang a silver bell, and at once a big fat colonel in a bright red uniform entered the room, followed by 10 lean soldiers, who all looked sad and discouraged, and saluted the princess in a very melancholy fashion. Carry that girl to the North Tower and lock her up, cried the princess, pointing to Dorothy. To hear is to obey, answered the big red colonel, and caught the child by her arm. But at that moment, Tik-Tok raised his dinner pail and pounded it so forcibly against the colonel's head that the big officer sat down on the floor with a sudden bump, looking both dazed and very much astonished. Help! He shouted, and the 10 lean soldiers sprang to assist their leader. There was great excitement for the next few moments, and Tik-Tok had knocked down 7 of the army, who were sprawling in every direction upon the carpet, when suddenly the machine paused, with the dinner pail raised for another blow, and remained perfectly motionless.
My action has run down,
he called to Dorothy.
Wind me up, quick.
She tried to obey, but the big colonel had by this time managed to get upon his feet again, so he grabbed fast hold of the girl, and she was helpless to escape.
This is too bad,
said the machine.
I ought to have run 6 hours longer at least. But I suppose my long walk and my fight with the wheelers made me run down faster than usual.
Well, it can't be helped, said Dorothy with a sigh. Will you exchange heads with me? Demanded the princess. No, indeed, cried Dorothy. Then lock her up, said Langwidere to her soldiers, and they led Dorothy to a high tower at the north of the palace and locked her securely within. The soldiers afterward tried to lift Tik-Tok, but they found the machine so solid and heavy that they could not stir it, so they left him standing in the centre of the drawing room. People will think I have a new statue, said Langwidere, so it won't matter in the least, and Nanda can keep him well polished. What shall we do with the hen? Asked the colonel, who had just discovered Billina in the work-basket. Put her in the chicken house, answered the princess. Some day I'll have her fried for breakfast. She looks rather tough, your highness, said Nanda doubtfully. That is a base slander, cried Billina, struggling frantically in the colonel's arms. But, the breed of chickens I come from is said to be poison to all princesses. Then, remarked Langwidere, I will not fry the hen, but keep her to lay eggs. And if she doesn't do her duty, I'll have her drowned in the horse trough. Hi, this is just a really quick reminder that if you're enjoying the stories on Willow Audiobooks, it would mean the absolute world to me if you'd consider becoming a patron on Patreon. There are 3 different pledge tiers, all with different perks attached to them, and above all, you'd be helping me to make sure I can keep doing this consistently. So please head on over to patreon.com/Willow Audiobooks and check out how you can get involved. Alternatively, I also really appreciate ratings and reviews left on iTunes or wherever you happen to get your podcasts. So if you haven't done that, please do. Thank you so much. Chapter 7. Ozma of Oz to the rescue. Nanda brought Dorothy bread and water for her supper, and she slept upon a hard stone couch with a single pillow and a silken coverlet. In the morning she leaned out of the window of her prison in the tower to see if there was any way to escape. The room was not so very high up when compared with our modern buildings, but it was far enough above the trees and farmhouses to give her a good view of the surrounding country. To the east, she saw the forest, with the sands beyond it and the ocean beyond that. There was even a dark speck upon the shore that she thought might be the chicken coop in which she had arrived at this singular country. Then she looked to the north, and saw a deep but narrow valley lying between two rocky mountains, and a third mountain that shut off the valley at the further end. Westward, the fertile land of Ev suddenly ended a little way from the palace, and the girl could see miles and miles of sandy desert that stretched further than her eyes could reach. It was this desert, she thought with much interest, that alone separated her from the wonderful land of Oz, and she remembered sorrowfully that she had been told no one had ever been able to cross this dangerous waste but herself. Once a cyclone had carried her across it, and a magical pair of silver shoes had carried her back again. But now she had neither a cyclone nor silver shoes to assist her, and her condition was sad indeed, for she had become the prisoner of a disagreeable princess who insisted that she must exchange her head for another one that she was not used to, and which might not fit her at all. Really, there seemed no hope of help for her from her old friends in the land of Oz. Thoughtfully, she gazed from her narrow window. On all the desert, not a living thing was stirring. Wait, though. Something surely was stirring on the desert. Something her eyes had not observed at first. Now it seemed like a cloud. Now it seemed like a spot of silver. Now it seemed to be a mass of rainbow colours that moved swiftly toward her. What could it be, she wondered. Then, gradually, but in a brief space of time nevertheless, the vision drew near enough to Dorothy to make out what it was. A broad green carpet was unrolling itself upon the desert. While advancing across the carpet was a wonderful procession that made the girl open her eyes in amazement as she gazed. First came a magnificent golden chariot, drawn by a great lion and an immense tiger, who stood shoulder to shoulder and trotted along as gracefully as a well-matched team of thoroughbred horses. And standing upright within the chariot was a beautiful girl clothed in flowing robes of silver gauze and wearing a jewelled diadem upon her dainty head. She held in one hand the satin ribbons that guided her astonishing team, and in the other an ivory wand that separated at the top into two prongs, the prongs being tipped by the letters O and Z, made of glistening diamonds set closely together. The girl seemed neither older nor larger than Dorothy herself, and at once the prisoner in the tower guessed that the lovely driver of the chariot must be that Ozma of Oz, of whom she had so lately heard from Tik-Tok. Following close behind the chariot, Dorothy saw her old friend the Scarecrow, riding calmly astride a wooden sawhorse, which pranced and trotted as naturally as any meat horse could have done. And then came Nick Chopper, the Tin Woodman, with his funnel-shaped cap tipped carelessly over his left ear, his gleaming axe over his right shoulder, and his whole body sparkling as brightly as it had ever done in the old days when she first knew him. The Tin Woodman was on foot, marching at the head of a company of 27 soldiers, of whom some were lean and some fat, some short and some tall, but all the 27 were dressed in handsome uniforms of various designs and colours, no two being alike in any respect. Behind the soldiers, the green carpet rolled itself up again, so that there was always just enough of it for the procession to walk upon, in order that their feet might not come in contact with the deadly, life-destroying sands of the desert. Dorothy knew at once it was a magic carpet she beheld, and her heart beat high with hope and joy as she realized she was soon to be rescued and allowed to greet her dearly beloved friends of Oz, the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the Cowardly Lion. Indeed, the girl felt herself as good as rescued as soon as she recognized those in the procession, for she knew well the courage and loyalty of her old comrades, and also believed that any others who came from their marvellous country would prove to be pleasant and reliable acquaintances. As soon as the last bit of desert was passed, and all the procession, from the beautiful and dainty Ozma to the last soldier, had reached the grassy meadows of the land of Ev, the magic carpet rolled itself together and entirely disappeared. Then the chariot driver turned her lion and tiger into a broad roadway leading up to the palace, and the others followed, while Dorothy still gazed from her tower window in eager excitement. They came quite close to the front door of the palace, and then halted, the Scarecrow dismounting from his sawhorse to approach the sign fastened to the door, that he might read what it said. Dorothy, just above him, could keep silent no longer. "Here I am!" she shouted as loudly as she could. "Here's Dorothy!" "Dorothy who?" asked the Scarecrow, tipping his head to look upward until he nearly lost his balance and tumbled over backward. "Dorothy Gale, of course. Your friend from Kansas," she answered. "Why, hello, Dorothy," said the Scarecrow. "What in the world are you doing up there?" "Nothing," she called down, "because there's nothing to do. Save me, my friend, save me." "You seem to be quite safe now," replied the Scarecrow. "But I'm a prisoner. I'm locked in so that I can't get out," she pleaded. "That's all right," said the Scarecrow. "You might be worse off, little Dorothy. Just consider the matter. You can't get drowned, or be run over by a wheeler, or fall out of an apple tree. Some folks would think they were lucky to be up there." "Well, I don't," declared the girl, "and I want to get down immediately to see you and the Tin Woodman and the Cowardly Lion." "Very well," said the Scarecrow, nodding. "It shall be just as you say, little friend. Who locked you up?" "The Princess Langwidere, who is a horrid creature," she answered. At this, Ozma, who had been listening carefully to the conversation, called to Dorothy from her chariot, asking, "Why did the princess lock you up, my dear?" "Because," exclaimed Dorothy, "I wouldn't let her have my head for her collection, and take an old cast-off head in exchange for it." "I do not blame you," exclaimed Ozma promptly. "I will see the princess at once, and oblige her to liberate you." "Oh, thank you very, very much," cried Dorothy, who, as soon as she heard the sweet voice of the girlish ruler of Oz, knew that she would soon learn to love her dearly. Ozma now drove her chariot around to the third door of the wing, upon which the Tin Woodman boldly proceeded to knock. As soon as the maid opened the door, Ozma, bearing in her hand her ivory wand, stepped into the hall and made her way at once to the drawing-room, followed by all her company, except the lion and the tiger. And the 27 soldiers made such a noise and a clatter that the little maid Nanda ran away screaming to her mistress, whereupon the Princess Langwidere, roused to great anger by this rude invasion of her palace, came running into the drawing-room without any assistance whatever. There she stood before the slight and delicate form of the little girl from Oz, and cried out, "How dare you enter my palace unbidden? Leave this room at once, or I will bind you and all your people in chains, and throw you into my darkest dungeons." "What a dangerous lady," murmured the Scarecrow in a soft voice. "She seems a little nervous," replied the Tin Woodman. But Ozma only smiled at the angry princess. "Sit down, please," she said quietly. "I have travelled a long way to see you, and you must listen to what I have to say." "Must!" screamed the princess, her black eyes flashing with fury, for she still wore her number 17 head. "Must! To me?" "To be sure," said Ozma. "I am ruler of the land of Oz, and I am powerful enough to destroy all your kingdom if I so wish. Yet I did not come here to do harm, but rather to free the royal family of Ev from the thrall of the Gnome King, the news having reached me that he is holding the Queen and her children prisoners." Hearing these words, Langwidere suddenly became quiet. "I wish you could indeed free my aunt and her 10 royal children," said she eagerly, "for if they were restored to their proper forms and station, they could rule the kingdom of Ev themselves, and that would save me a lot of worry and trouble. At present, there are at least 10 minutes every day that I must devote to affairs of state, and I would like to be able to spend my whole time in admiring my beautiful heads." "Then we will presently discuss this matter," said Ozma, "and try to find a way to liberate your aunt and cousins. But first, you must liberate another prisoner, the little girl you have locked up in your tower." "Of course," said Langwidere readily. "I had forgotten all about her. That was yesterday, you know, and a princess cannot be expected to remember today what she did yesterday. Come with me, and I will release the prisoner at once." So Ozma followed her, and they passed up the stairs that led to the room in the tower. While they were gone, Ozma's followers remained in the drawing-room, and the Scarecrow was leaning against a form that he had mistaken for a copper statue, when a harsh metallic voice said suddenly in his ear,
"Get off my foot, please. You are scratching my polish."
"Oh, excuse me," he replied, hastily drawing back. "Are you alive?"
"No,"
said Tik-Tok.
"I am only a machine, but I can think and speak and act when I am properly wound up. Just now my action is run down, and Dorothy has the key to it."
"That's all right," replied the Scarecrow. "Dorothy will soon be free, and then she'll attend to your works. But it must be a great misfortune not to be alive. I'm sorry for you."
"Why?"
asked Tik-Tok. "Because you have no brains, as I have," said the Scarecrow.
"Oh, yes, I have.
Returned Tik-Tok.
I am fitted with Smith and Tinker's improved combination steel brains. They are what make me think." "What sort of brains are you fitted with?"
"I don't know," admitted the Scarecrow. "They were given to me by the great Wizard of Oz, and I didn't get a chance to examine them before he put them in. But they work splendidly, and my conscience is very active. Have you a conscience?"
"No,"
said Tik-Tok. "And no heart, I suppose," added the Tin Woodman, who had been listening with interest to this conversation.
"No,"
said Tik-Tok. "Then," continued the Tin Woodman, "I regret to say that you are greatly inferior to my friend the Scarecrow and to myself. For we are both alive, and he has brains which do not need to be wound up, while I have an excellent heart that is continually beating in my bosom."
"I congratulate you,"
replied Tik-Tok.
"I cannot help being your inferior, for I am a mere machine. When I am wound up, I do my duty by going just as my machinery is made to go. You have no idea how full of machinery I am."
"I can guess," said the Scarecrow, looking at the machine man curiously. "Some day I'd like to take you apart and see just how you are made."
"Do not do that, I beg of you,"
said Tik-Tok.
"for you could not put me together again, and my usefulness would be destroyed."
"Oh, are you useful?" asked the Scarecrow, surprised.
"Very,"
said Tik-Tok. "In that case," the Scarecrow kindly promised, "I won't fool with your interior at all, for I am a poor mechanic and might mix you up."
"Thank you,"
said Tik-Tok. Just then, Ozma re-entered the room, leading Dorothy by the hand, and followed closely by Princess Langwidere. Chapter 8. The Hungry Tiger. The first thing Dorothy did was to rush into the embrace of the Scarecrow, whose painted face beamed with delight as he pressed her form to his straw-padded bosom. Then the Tin Woodman embraced her, very gently, for he knew his tin arms might hurt her if he squeezed too roughly. These greetings having been exchanged, Dorothy took the key to Tik-Tok from her pocket and wound up the machine man's action, so that he could bow properly when introduced to the rest of the company. While doing this, she told them how useful Tik-Tok had been to her, and both the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman shook hands with the machine once more and thanked him for protecting their friend. Then Dorothy asked, "Where's Billina?" "I don't know," said the Scarecrow. "Who is Billina?" "She's a yellow hen who's another friend of mine," answered the girl anxiously. "I wonder what has become of her." "She's in the chicken house in the backyard," said the princess. "My drawing room is no place for hens." Without waiting to hear more, Dorothy ran to get Billina, and just outside the door, she came upon the Cowardly Lion, still hitched to the chariot beside the great tiger. The Cowardly Lion had a big bow of blue ribbon fastened to the long hair between his ears, and the tiger wore a bow of red ribbon on his tail just in front of the bushy end. In an instant, Dorothy was hugging the huge lion joyfully. "I'm so glad to see you again," she cried. "I am also glad to see you, Dorothy," said the lion. "We've had some fine adventures together, haven't we?" "Yes, indeed," she replied. "How are you?" "As cowardly as ever," the beast answered in a meek voice. "Every little thing scares me and makes my heart beat fast. But let me introduce you to a new friend of mine, the Hungry Tiger." "Oh, are you hungry?" she asked, turning to the other beast, who was just then yawning so widely that he displayed 2 rows of terrible teeth and a mouth big enough to startle anyone. "Dreadfully hungry," answered the tiger, snapping his jaws together with a fierce click. "Then why don't you eat something?" she asked. "It's no use," said the tiger sadly. "I've tried that, but I always get hungry again." "Why, it is the same with me," said Dorothy. "Yet I keep on eating." "But you eat harmless things, so it doesn't matter," replied the tiger. "For my part, I'm a savage beast, and have an appetite for all sorts of poor little living creatures, from a chipmunk to fat babies." "How dreadful," said Dorothy. "Isn't it, though?" returned the hungry tiger, licking his lips with his long red tongue. "Fat babies. Don't they sound delicious? But I've never eaten any, because my conscience tells me it is wrong. If I had no conscience, I would probably eat the babies, and then get hungry again, which would mean that I had sacrificed the poor babies for nothing. No, hungry I was born, and hungry I shall die. But I'll not have any cruel deeds on my conscience to be sorry for." "I think you are a very good tiger," said Dorothy, patting the huge head of the beast. "In that you are mistaken," was the reply. "I am a good beast, perhaps, but a disgracefully bad tiger. For it is the nature of tigers to be cruel and ferocious, and in refusing to eat harmless living creatures, I am acting as no good tiger has ever before acted. That is why I left the forest and joined my friend, the Cowardly Lion." "But the lion is not really cowardly," said Dorothy. "I've seen him act as bravely as can be." "All a mistake, my dear," protested the lion gravely. "To others I may have seemed brave at times, but I have never been in any danger that I was not afraid." "Nor I," said Dorothy truthfully. "But I must go and set free Billina, and then I will see you again." She ran round to the backyard of the palace, and soon found the chicken house, being guided to it by a loud cackling and crowing, and a distracting hubbub of sounds such as chickens make when they are excited. Something seemed to be wrong in the chicken house, and when Dorothy looked through the slats in the door, she saw a group of hens and roosters huddled in one corner, and watching what appeared to be a whirling ball of feathers. It bounded here and there about the chicken house, and at first Dorothy could not tell what it was, while the screeching of the chickens nearly deafened her. But suddenly, the bunch of feathers stopped whirling, and then, to her amazement, the girl saw Billina crouching upon the prostrate form of a speckled rooster. For an instant, they both remained motionless, and then the yellow hen shook her wings to settle the feathers and walked toward the door, with a strut of proud defiance and a cluck of victory, while the speckled rooster limped away to the group of other chickens, trailing his crumpled plumage in the dust as he went. "Why, Billina!" cried Dorothy in a shocked voice. "Have you been fighting?" "I really think I have," retorted Billina. "Do you think I'd let that speckled villain of a rooster lord it over me and claim to run this chicken house as long as I'm able to peck and scratch? Not if my name is Bill." "It isn't Bill, it's Billina. And you're talking slang, which is very undignified," said Dorothy reprovingly. "Come here, Billina, and I'll let you out, for Ozma of Oz is here and has set us free." So the yellow hen came to the door, which Dorothy unlatched for her to pass through, and the other chickens silently watched them from their corner without offering to approach nearer. The girl lifted her friend in her arms and exclaimed, "Oh, Billina, how dreadful you look! You've lost a lot of feathers, and one of your eyes is nearly pecked out, and your comb is bleeding." "That's nothing," said Billina. "Just look at the speckled rooster. Didn't I do him up brown?" Dorothy shook her head. "I don't approve of this at all," she said, carrying Billina away toward the palace. "It isn't a good thing for you to associate with those common chickens. They would soon spoil your good manners, and you wouldn't be respectable anymore." "I didn't ask to associate with them," replied Billina. "It is that cross old princess who's to blame. But I was raised in the United States, and I won't allow any one-horse chicken of the land of Ev to run over me and put on airs, as long as I can lift a claw in self-defence." "Very well, Billina," said Dorothy. "We won't talk about it any more." Soon they came to the Cowardly Lion and the Hungry Tiger, to whom the girl introduced the yellow hen. "Glad to meet any friend of Dorothy's," said the lion politely. "To judge by your present appearance, you are not a coward as I am." "Your present appearance makes my mouth water," said the tiger, looking at Billina greedily. My, how good you would taste if I could only crunch you between my jaws. But don't worry, you would only appease my appetite for a moment, so it isn't worthwhile to eat you." "Thank you," said the hen, nestling closer in Dorothy's arms. "Besides, it wouldn't be right," continued the tiger, looking steadily at Billina and clicking his jaws together. "Of course not," cried Dorothy hastily. "Billina is my friend, and you mustn't ever eat her under any circumstances." "I'll try to remember that," said the tiger, "but I'm a little absent-minded at times." Then Dorothy carried her pet into the drawing-room of the palace, where Tik-Tok, being invited to do so by Ozma, had seated himself between the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman. Opposite to them sat Ozma herself and the Princess Langwidere, and beside them there was a vacant chair for Dorothy. Around this important group was ranged the army of Oz, and as Dorothy looked at the handsome uniforms of the 27, she said, "Why, they all seem to be officers." "They are. All except one," answered the Tin Woodman. "I have in my army 8 generals, 6 colonels, 7 majors, and 5 captains, besides 1 private for them to command. I'd like to promote the private, for I believe no private should ever be in public life, and I've also noticed that officers usually fight better and are more reliable than common soldiers. Besides, the officers are more important-looking and lend dignity to our army." "No doubt you're right," said Dorothy, seating herself beside Ozma. "And now," announced the girlish ruler of Oz, "we will hold a solemn conference to decide the best manner of liberating the royal family of this fair land of Ev from their long imprisonment." To stay updated with Willow Audiobooks, you can follow us on social media. Just search for Willow Audiobooks on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, or you can visit our webpage at stephenalexanderwillis.com/Willow Audiobooks. If you're enjoying this audiobook, why not leave a rating or a review on iTunes or wherever you happen to get your podcasts?